Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the next of these ESCoE economic measurement webinars. So I'm David Freeman. I head up the labour market and households team at ONS, and I'm really pleased to be asked to chair this session. It combines a lot of things that are very pertinent to the labour market, so about measurement and how we can best measure the labour market, but also bringing in elements of job quality, which has been very much forefront of the political debate around employment for a number of years, particularly since the 2008 economic downturn. So we're going to be pleased to have three brilliant speakers here, two speakers and a discussion here today. So Rosie Oxbury and Liz Gallagher work at Nesta, and I've been doing work under the ESCoE umbrella on using online job adverts to detect damage to the job quality and to see what's on offer in the labour market. And we're very pleased to have Julia Schmidt, formerly of OECD, now at the University of Paris-Dauphine, to act as the discussant. So we'll have the presentation from Rosie and Liz initially, then I'll hand over to Julie to discuss, and then we'll have a session for Q&A at the end. And if you want to ask a question, if you tap on the Q&A icon at the top of your screen, that will open up the panel at the side. And if you pop your question in there, and then during the Q&A bit, I might come to you to come off mute and ask your question directly, or we might amalgamate some similar questions together. So I think that's all domestics. Without further ado, I'll hand over to Rosie and Liz for the presentation.
Thanks, David. So today Rosie and I are going to be speaking about our work at Nesta on using data science to automatically detect dimensions of job quality. And I'm going to kick us off with a bit of an introduction to Nesta and this work that we do. And then I'm going to pass over to Rosie, who's really the brains of the job quality side of things. So yeah, she'll go into much more depth with that. So next slide. So I think we'll kick off with introduction to Nesta and what we call the Open Jobs Observatory, or OJO. And I'll give a bit of a roundup of the kind of data science methodologies that we use at Nesta, and then pass over to Rosie for the deep dive into the job quality work, how we did it, some evaluation, the applications, and the future work. So next slide. So first of all, so what do we do at Nesta in terms of using online job adverts? And to begin with, next slide, please. For those of you that don't know who Nesta are, we are a charity that design, test and scale new solutions to society's biggest problems. And we're mission driven, and we have three mission areas. We have a fairer start, which is about narrowing the outcome gap between children growing up in disadvantage and the national average. We have a healthy life, which is about increasing the average number of healthy years lived in the UK while narrowing health inequalities. And we have a sustainable future, which is accelerating the UK's transition to a low carbon productive economy by cutting UK household emissions. And at the data science practice at Nesta, we kind of work across all three of these missions on all sorts of projects. And certain projects kind of cross across all three of those missions, and that primarily is our work on the labour market. And we find ways to kind of use this labour market work in these different mission areas. And when we're working, we're always trying to be transparent about what we've done, and as much as we can release things openly, whether that's releasing the code openly or tools that we might have created or analysis. So next slide. So this work on all things kind of labour market has kind of began in some ways in 2018, where we developed a data-driven skills taxonomy for the UK. And this was using a data set of job adverts that we bought, and we created this skills taxonomy on top of that. In 2019, we did a bit of work on measuring regional skill mismatches, again using a purchased data set of job adverts. And then we started to to get the capability and the kind of realization that we could start gathering our own job adverts from online sources. So we began collecting that by scraping online job forums. And that really allowed us to provide that free and timely labour market information with the data set that we had. And of course, it saves quite a bit of money. And then since then, we've been developing all sorts of tools on top of that. So I suppose lots of you will probably be familiar with TextKernel or Lightcast, and you might know that they have certain bits of extra information that perhaps their data science teams have come up with, such as extracting skills from them. So because we had our own in-house data set of job adverts, we had to build some of those algorithms. So yeah, we've developed all sorts of those. So we've got a skills extractor, we did some work on green jobs, we've looked at extracting occupation and industry, and most recently job quality. So next slide. So yeah, so Open Jobs Observatory has been going since 2021. We collect on a daily basis, and along the way, the project's been funded by ESCoE, of course, but also the Department of Education and the UKRI. Next slide, please. So we now have over 7 million job adverts, and on top of that, we've done various bits of analysis. So we can look at like the number of job adverts by region, for example. We've done some work on skills, so extracting skills, but then analysing which skills are most commonly asked for in different job adverts, in different occupations. And it allows us to do things like look at similar occupations based off skills overlaps. So we've done some work on that. And another project which is kind of still ongoing is our work on green jobs. So with that, we can say things like which regions are most are asking most for green skills. So yeah, that kind of data science pipeline, which kind of underlies a lot of that analysis, looks something like this. So we're scraping job adverts, we generate additional features using machine learning, we might do some sort of standardization and enrichment of the data set, and then this insight analysis based off whatever our research question is. And for those steps in a bit more depth, scraping, as you can imagine, looks something like this. So we're taking an online job forum and we're structuring the data off that. Step 2 is using machine learning. So this step is often the hardest one. So here I've highlighted where we might extract a company description part of a job advert. And in green, it's the kind of green skills that might be asked for. So yeah, we've developed different types of machine learning approaches here, obviously using natural language processing techniques. And then step 3 is standardizing this. So as you can imagine, if you want to create some analysis from that, you might need to standardize it a bit more. So something we might do with the company descriptions is match them to an industry code, a SIC code. So we do some sort of process of mapping. And step 4 is enrichment. So we don't always need to do this, but sometimes it's useful. So in the case of our work on green jobs, we wanted to match the SIC codes, the industry codes, to a data set from the ONS on greenhouse gas emissions per industry. So we might do things like that. And step 5, as you can imagine with this analysis, is narrowing it down. So we might just start filtering our data sets to the research questions. So thinking about maybe it's what skills are asked for in a certain year, or what job quality is like in the education sector. And finally, step 6, we're really dedicated to creating open source tools here. So this is the point where we're generating insights. So using all that data to try to get something interesting out of it, but also to make that open source. So we spend quite a bit of time developing tools or interactive analysis kind of blogs or websites for other people to dig into our data for their own research purposes. So I think that's the end of my slides. And oh no, one more. So yeah, so these are some of the free products and open source code on top of that. So we've got our skills taxonomy. We have a skills extractor, which you can use if you're familiar with Python. So there's a pip installable package for that. But we also built an interactive analysis blog to explore the data and a demo tool. And then for the green jobs work, we have a website called the Green Jobs Explorer, which allows you to download the data, but also to have a deep dive into particular occupations and how green they might be, as well as compare occupations. So now I think that's the end of my bit. So yeah, I hope that gives a bit of a flavour of who Nesta are and what we're doing in the labour market space, as well as some of that like overall data science pipeline. And now over to Rosie for the more in-depth part about job quality.
Thanks, Liz. That was a really nice introduction to Nesta and the work that we've done on the labour markets and the tools that we've built so far. Yeah, so I'm now going to talk about our recent work on job quality. So this is a project that was funded by ESCoE and done in partnership with the ONS. And we've, it's used the Open Jobs Observatory data, and we wrapped it up recently, although we're working on a new piece of analysis now. And for those unfamiliar with the concept, although that's probably not many of you, job quality refers to the aspects of work that contribute to worker well-being. And as David mentioned earlier, it's a really important topic of research because, well, of course, worker well-being in its own right is important, but it's also linked to worker productivity and productivity in the economy as a whole. So better job quality means more people in work and contributing to the economy, basically. In terms of how we're defining job quality for this project, we took this report, Measuring Good Work by the Job Quality Working Group, as our starting point. It categorises job quality under 7 key dimensions: terms of employment, pay and benefits, health, safety and psychosocial well-being at work, job design and the nature of work, which covers things like whether you're fully utilising your skills in your job and whether there are opportunities for progression, social support and cohesion in the workplace, voice and representation, and work-life balance. And when we talk about extracting job quality from job adverts, what we mean then is something like this. We wanted to build a tool that, similar to our other tools, that could parse the text of a job advert and then extract those bits of text that relate to job quality. Not all aspects of job quality would plausibly be referenced in a job advert, but you can get information, for example, about pay and benefits. You can get information about terms of employment, and you can also see sentences that hint at the less tangible or the more subjective dimensions, like job design and nature of work, and social support and cohesion. So based on an initial analysis by the team of a random sample, we determined that we could attempt to extract the dimensions of job quality that you see in the first 2 columns. whereas the right-hand column shows subdimensions that either didn't appear in job adverts. So, for example, we just didn't see job adverts that mentioned trade unions as a benefit, surprisingly. Or there's on the right, there's also subdimensions that are too kind of too subjective, too dependent on the individual's experience of the job, like line manager relationship, for example. And we describe what we're doing as extracting offered job quality, because we've designed a tool that works with job adverts, but job adverts do have this key limitation that they cannot tell you about, of course, the employee's experience of the job, which is a crucial part of job quality. So we're calling our offering offered job quality instead. So I'll now describe the methodology that we've described for extracting job quality. This diagram is hopefully kind of similar to the overviews that Liz gave earlier of the methods that we use, and it gives a really high-level picture of what the tool does. So the input, as you can see, would be raw job advert text on the left. The next stage is a machine learning classifier that filters just those sentences from the job advert that relate to benefits or the job offering, as opposed to things like company descriptions and role requirements. Then finally, those sentences that are about job quality are split up into chunks and then matched to a taxonomy that we've developed. And I'll go over these steps in more detail in the following slides. So I'll first talk about the classification step. We decided that this is necessary for two main reasons. The first is that there's a lot of language in job adverts that can be about job quality, but it's highly dependent on context. So, for example, both of these sentences that you see here include language related to learning and development. But the first one is about learning and development as a benefit that you would get while in the job, whereas the second one is a role requirement. Part of the requirements of that job is delivering training for other people. The second reason is that the final stage of the process, as I've mentioned, involved chunking up the text into lots of pieces and matching it to a taxonomy, which can be quite intensive if you're putting a lot of data through it. So this reduces the volume of data that needs to go through that step. So ultimately, it makes the whole process more efficient. In terms of what we did to make the classifier, we labeled around 1,600 sentences from 478 job adverts as either related to job quality or not related to job quality. And we then fine-tuned a transformer model. This means we took a neural network that other people had put lots of data and resources into training, and we then kind of steal that knowledge for ourselves. We continue its training on a smaller task-specific data set, and this is beneficial because it allows the model to retain the knowledge that it obtained at its original training, but it also improves its performance on this specific task that we want it to do well at. So in this case, we had actually used this model before for our company description classifier and found it very good then as well. And yeah, the model's already learned from 3 million job advert sentences. And we found this to be the best option in terms of a trade-off between the model's accuracy and how efficient it is at making inferences on new data. So I'll now talk about the final step where we match pieces of text to the taxonomy that we developed. Yeah, imagine we've already identified the sections of the job advert that relate to job quality, and now they need to be matched to the taxonomy. So the taxonomy is quite long, obviously. This slide shows just the section that's about work-life balance. And you'll see that we have two subdimensions here, flexible hours and flexible location. So yeah, things like hybrid and remote working. For each of these sub-dimensions, we have a list of what we've called here key phrases. So these are the way that we might expect these, the phrases that we would expect to show up in job adverts and that relate to these dimensions of job quality. And the way that these key phrases get matched to the actual text from the job advert is by comparing text embeddings. So for those unfamiliar with this concept, using text embeddings means kind of converting each text to a set of numbers that are like map coordinates. So texts with more similar meanings have more similar coordinates, and texts that are more different from each other have coordinates that are further apart. So in this example, you can see that the two sentences about contracts end up in a kind of similar area to each other, whereas the one that's about salary ends up further away. And you can use a metric called cosine similarity to quantify how close or how far apart these texts are in coordinate space. And if this metric is above a threshold, then we consider it a match. And actually, Liz put in a lot of work to determine the best thresholds for each of these dimensions of job quality. So yeah, this diagram shows how the approach works in practice. The phrase opportunity to work in a supportive and collaborative environment gets split up into smaller overlapping pieces. And the key phrase that we're considering as a match is supportive environment. In this case, several chunks of text get a cosine similarity score that's above the threshold. So we take the one with the highest score, which is supportive and collaborative environment, and we take that as the final match. So in terms of how the algorithm performs, recall that these are the dimensions of job quality and the specific things within them that we thought we might be able to extract. And then this is kind of how it actually pans out. So on the left, we have dimensions of job quality where we're pretty confident in the extraction. So career progression, learning and development, perks, flexible hours and flexible location. They all do fairly well. The ones in the next column, so pay, leave, and hours, the extraction works really well, but they need further downstream processing is needed that we basically ran out of time to do. So the algorithm can pull out bits of text that tell you that mention annual leave or that mention pay or hours, but you would need to do further work to quantify how many hours or how much the pay is. Then the next column, this one, the extraction of contract type is okay. There are some, it could be better. We find that there's false positives related to some words like position or month in the context of like 6-month employment or fixed term position. And some mentions of contract type occur as a descriptor of a role, and these aren't caught particularly well. And then on the right, we have the ones that the algorithm doesn't do too well at. And in most cases, well, in some cases, this is to do with very little training data or very little evaluation data. In some cases, it's to do with false positives, which I think I'll describe next. Yeah, so I won't go into too much detail, but just to give an idea of some of the reasons why this is actually quite a difficult thing to do. In some cases, there are false positives due to industry or occupation. So the first example is a sentence which contains lots of information about the benefits of the job, like work-life balance and an uplift for overtime, but it also says you should be an experienced nurse. And then this gets matched to private medical insurance, which is not what we want. And then there are some, the n-gram approach that we've developed works quite well, but for some things it does lead to false positives. So for example, the second example correctly gets identified as being about contract type because it's a maternity leave cover. But the algorithm also thinks that the job is offering maternity leave, when in fact this is not the case from this data. I'm going to talk about some applications that we've done now. So the aim is to give you a kind of flavour of what you could do with this tool. And we did two analyses. One which was really for that purpose, to just show what the tool could do by analysing a random sample of job adverts. The second one was in support of Nesta's A Fairer Start mission that Liz mentioned earlier, which is about reducing the outcome gap between children from more advantaged and less advantaged backgrounds. So the first analysis used a random sample of 83,000 job adverts from the Open Jobs Observatory from 2020 to 2022. We focused on flexible hours, flexible location, and learning and development opportunities. We also brought in some additional metadata that we had from the Open Jobs Observatory on salaries. And the intention was to get an overview of job quality in the UK from job adverts. So just to highlight here, we looked at we looked at various things, but we looked at the relationship between salary and various aspects of job quality in different occupations. This graph shows the median salary of a sector on the x-axis and the percentage of jobs in that sector that offer flexible location on the y-axis. And in this case, we can see a slightly positive relationship between salary and offers of flexible location. So information technology tends to be paid the highest and also has the highest proportion of jobs offering flexible location. Whereas in the bottom left of the graph, we have sectors that have lower salaries and also a lower proportion of jobs offering flexible location. So here we have education, hospitality and catering, and logistics and transport. The next graph is the same, but shows the relationship between salary and offers of flexible hours. And we see the opposite trend. So salaries with a higher median salary also tend to have a higher proportion of adverts offering flexible hours. There is one caveat here that some of these sectors have a high rate of 0 hours contracts. So for example, logistics and transport and hospitality and catering. This suggests that potentially in some of these cases, employers are kind of trying to sell their 0 hours contracts as a positive thing, which for some people it might be that it offers lots of flexibility. But in reality, it may not be a positive thing for all employees. And unfortunately, education again turns up in the bottom left of the graph, so it doesn't have particular flexibility of either hours or location. And in general, we thought that analyses like these would be useful in cases where recruitment and retention needs to be improved in a particular sector, because if you can compare all these different dimensions of job quality in a given sector and see which ones that sector doesn't do so well at, then you have an idea of where job quality in that sector could be improved, and policies could potentially then be recommended to improve job quality and thus improve recruitment in that area. And the next analysis that we did was kind of along these lines. It's about education, and as I said, it was supporting Nesta's A Fairer Start mission. Part of improving outcomes in the early years is about improving access to childcare. And at the moment, childcare settings in the UK are struggling to recruit and retain early years practitioners. And it's thought that early years practitioners are leaving their sector for jobs in hospitality and retail, which potentially offer greater flexibility or are less demanding in some way. So we set out to see if we could find any clues as to why this might be from what we could get about job quality from job adverts. So I'll move on to say what we found. So this graph is organized by profession. Each group of bars is a sector, and it shows the median pay per hour, the percentage of job adverts in that sector that offer career progression, the percentage of job adverts in that sector that mention flexible hours, and the percentage of job adverts that mention learning and development. And the first finding in terms of comparing early years practitioners and waiting and retail was that they seemed quite similar in terms of both median pay and in terms of offers of flexible hours. So we had the initial hypothesis that maybe hospitality and retail had greater flexibility compared to early years practitioners, but from what is stated in the job adverts, we didn't have evidence that that's the case, which would suggest that it would be something else driving the move to waiting and retail from job adverts anyway. And then secondly, learning and development is thought to be really important in jobs in the education sector, and we actually found that early years practitioners was the sector with the highest proportion of ads mentioning both learning and development and career progression. So we'd had the hypothesis that maybe not enough opportunity for learning and development or career progression might be an issue for early years practitioners, and indeed it quite probably is still a reality for those in the job. But in terms of what's actually offered, employers at least claim to be offering lots of learning and development and lots of career progression. So this kind of highlights an area for further investigation, and it's an area where you would want to match up what you get from job adverts with labour force surveys, which would be the next step for an analysis like this. Yeah, I'll kind of wrap up now before we move on to the discussion. So in terms of what we found, we're really pleased with how far we got in terms of what we can extract from job adverts. Various dimensions of job quality can be reliably extracted. It's an open source package, and we have deliberately made it so that researchers can take it and either use it directly or adapt it for their own purposes. And we would really encourage this, and we'd ask you to get in touch with feedback or with questions about how to use it, because this is really, as Liz said, what we try to do with our projects at Nesta, and particularly our labour market work. We've also focused as far as possible on making it scalable and efficient, whilst being still a package that uses modern NLP techniques. In terms of impact, this tool provides a way of finding what aspects of job quality employers are offering. So really, it allows job quality researchers to take advantage of job adverts as an additional data source. And it can be applied to any area where recruitment and retention of the workforce is an issue. So, so far we've applied it to the early years sector, as I just described. We're also currently in the process of applying it to the healthcare sector to analyse what job adverts can tell us about job quality for healthcare staff. There's important limitations, which I've covered, but to summarise here, of course, a key one is that job adverts alone cannot tell you about job quality, which is why we're saying that the tool can give you offered job quality. And then also there are some dimensions of job quality where the performance of the algorithm is not what we would hope it to be. In most cases, this is due to lack of labelled data, and in some cases false positives as well, which we would need more work to iron out. In terms of future work and avenues for improvement, further support is needed for downstream processing, so passing numeric information, number of hours and salary, for example. And then also determining contract type, so not just identifying sections of text where the contract is mentioned, but classifying whether it's a permanent contract or a fixed term contract. And yeah, we could do more work to reduce false positives in specific dimensions, although this is likely to require more labeled data, which of course takes time to create. Refining the taxonomy could help here. And yeah, preventing industry-specific false positives is quite important, because while we trained and developed this this algorithm on a sample of job adverts, the sample was not big enough to cover every possible industry or occupation. So this is something that we would warn researchers when they're using the tool to take some care to check how this generalizes to the specific sector that they're interested in. And yeah, we have thanks to our colleagues at Nesta and ESCoE and ONS, and also a number of academics and industry experts were kind enough to give their time to advise us on this project. And I can see Alan Felsted on the call. There may be others here too, but yeah, we're really grateful for all the input that we received. So yeah, thanks so much.
Well, thank you very much, Rosie and Liz. There, really fascinating presentations and amazing work here, and really, really good to see the use of it with that early practitioners analysis. But what I'll do now is hand over to Julia, who's going to sort of act as a discussant. So please take it away, Julia.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Rosie and Liz, and welcome from my side. I can only repeat what David said. It's an amazing amount of work. I know how much that entails. I used to work with Lightcast job online advertisements, and you even do the step before that, you web scrape as well. So I think it's really big congratulations on all of the achievements you have already managed to do with like extracting these type of indicators. So let me share my screen a few slides, but I think I want to rather keep that really as a dialogue and to just yeah, also engage in the discussions afterwards. So and for me, it was also an opportunity to reconnect to the work that Nesta has been doing. I remember listening to talks already at the ESCoE conference and measurement in 2023. So it's really great to see how this has been progressing since then. So what I will do, and I think everyone can see my screen now, if I'm not mistaken, I'll quickly summarize this tool. Then I want to, yeah, ask some questions on one of the applications you showed, and then line out some applications that I think could be interesting from a research perspective. And then have a couple of open questions, as you were also saying you want this tool to be used by other people. And I think that invites and provides a good link to the Q&A that we will have after that. So what we've just heard, and I think it's been really an amazing way to introduce it, is that we have a tool that is a Python package. I checked it out as well. There's a GitHub repository. You can use it. It's free of charge, and it extracts job quality criteria based on the CIPD Good Work Index as a framework. And there is already the application, as we've seen, to over 80,000 job advertisements from the Open Jobs Observatory, and then for specific sectoral parts like the early career case, or also the health sector case that you're currently working on. So I think it's amazing that this pipeline is fully automated. I believe from reading the background materials that is a Spacey pipeline. So I've worked with that myself. I think it's great. It's fully transparent and free of charge, which I think is amazing for researchers, because you can really see everything the tool does and also manipulate it. And it extracts dimensions related to pay and benefits, work-life balance, job design and the nature of work, social support and cohesion, and health and safety and social well-being, with a bit of heterogeneity in terms of which of these dimensions are covered well. But I think there as well, you're pretty substantial already. I mean, the points, I really love the way you put it, like which dimensions are are already well represented, and I think it's just natural to see that not everything works right away. And as Rosie and Liz pointed out, it's a great alternative data source to existing labor force surveys and also employer reviews. And I think that's also where I will want to get back to in the open questions. So something that came to my mind when I looked at the results from the application, and I think it's something that ties also in the applications that I would like to point out, is that when you showed here this graph on, okay, the higher your median salary, the more flexible your location can be of the offered location in the job advertisement. What strikes is the information technology sector, and that kind of felt really intuitive because we all heard of these software developers that are kind of able to work remotely, and that does have a lot of flexibility. But that was quite striking to me that in terms of the hours, that's quite the opposite. So we see kind of the information technology sector here is not at all that flexible. And I think that's interesting to explore. And I know that was beyond the scope of the exercise here, but I think it could be interesting to see if there's a possibility to drill down a little bit. And I think it's also for some of the other sectors, but here the difference was just so striking. Which type of companies are there driving that difference? Is it a big tech? Is it the smaller ones? Maybe with the location of the companies? And I think there already, only with these two results, we see how rich this tool can be and how many questions one could possibly answer with them. So I was wondering if you had some observations on that, or if there's, and I think there is a lot of potential to go more granular. Another dimension that came to my mind was, for instance, management level. Like, can we say something about the managerial position that could maybe also potentially driving these differences? Then just to come a bit to, thinking about what could be interesting given the current topics that could be exciting from an academic and policy research point of view, and that also would mean that there could be maybe developments into how these data sets are linkable. I think one that of course comes to my mind immediately is how are the job quality offer change? How does it change with the advent of AI? And do we see something from when ChatGPT came into place, or from 2017 onwards when the big transformer models took off? I mean, and this could be really a nice way of exploring it. I know you have applied them, the current applications, but that you showed is only until 2022, but I'm sure there's a way to extend and see if there's maybe big differences in the type of dimensions that are covered, given the technology shocks that we are repeatedly experiencing now in the economy. The other thing that I think could be really, really fascinating to explore are company strategies. And for that, of course, it would be interesting to match the data sets to some extent to companies themselves. I know that is tricky, but I know you can extract, or at least you pointed out, you have the company description. So kind of these talent strategies, what type of talent do they attract, and is job quality playing a role there? Can we make some differences maybe between multinational and local companies, or even by size? I mean, there could be some crosswalks to be done between the industry and the distribution of companies by size. So maybe that's something that could be really, really interesting. Another point that I wanted to just bring out there, and maybe David also has some thoughts on that, is links between employee mental health and job quality. I think it's super interesting. And this would mean that there may be a way to link employer surveys to this type of data, and see if employees in a specific company where we have information about their mental health status actually, is that linked to some dimensions of job quality offered? Can we say something about that? I think could be nice. And the last one, I think, is a more traditional point, but I think it could be also interesting to see if this job quality offer change with like how the economy behaves more broadly. For that, it would less be about matching. I think it would be more about extending a little bit the time series, but at the same time, you have a lot of very granular data. So I think could be really interesting to observe, especially given the recent discussions on where we are going. So these are just 4 broad topics and ways forward. I think I would end up with some open questions, coming first a bit more from the technical point of view. You described very well how the pipeline works and what you do to extract your chunks and the parts of the sentences. And you also said that you invite others to use the tool and apply it and maybe retrain it. So I think a nice question also to discuss here with the audience is like, what challenges did you face when you were training the tool first? So for people like me or other people, when we start training the tool maybe on other data, on other job advertisements, what would be the pitfalls to avoid, and what can you advise on? And then linking to that, what do you recommend if you apply it to other job advertisements? So what I mean here is, can you see it? I know in Space it's quite easy to change languages. Have you done some tests on it? Would that be a possibility? And also, what kind of, I mean, there would be then taxonomy adjustments potentially that come from that. So maybe you have some insights on that. And then going back to my previous exploration parts, I was wondering how adaptable your data set is to match, if you have tried, for instance, to match to firm level, if there's some tests on that. And also, of course, given that we have a specialist here from the ONS, David, I don't know how you see that working out. You said like crosswalks to official vacancy data, but maybe also labor force service could be interesting. So I think it could be nice to discuss. And a final point that is just coming from the representation or the aspect of how representative is the data. And I think linking to that is something you mentioned as well, Rosie, that we have already information on the offered job quality, but we don't know actually what the job quality is. So for that, you need employer reviews. And something that came to my mind, and you may know about the data set, it's called Revelio Labs. It's a company from the US, and they have basically a really huge data set, not only on job advertisements, but also on this employer reviews. So it could be a way maybe to strike a partnership and see if that could be a nice way to test for the UK specifically, whether your job quality offered also corresponds to what employees report on certain, at company level on certain companies. But I understand there's a huge agenda to cover, so you need to prioritize. And I'm looking forward to discussion with everyone. And I hand back to David. I think I'm out of time as well. And yes, leave the rest for the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Julie. So there's some really great questions there. Shall I just hand over to Rosie and Liz, just say if there's anything they want to pick up from the question you raised, and then we can pick up the questions in the Q&A. Just remind people that you can drop things in there. Rosie, is there anything you wanted to pick up from Julie's presentation?
Just 2 things that come to mind. I think the point about extending it to other languages is a really good one. And to be honest, something that we didn't think about too much while we were developing it. The bit that would be easier to change would be the mapping to the taxonomy, because you can change what embedding model you use. The bit that would be trickier would be the classification step, because I think that the model that we that was based on, I think might be just English, but I'm actually not sure. But that's a really good point. And then about the challenges in what was most challenging, probably getting labeled data. It's really when you think about looking at a job advert to determine what counts as job quality or what doesn't, you can see those parts of a job advert that relate to salary, for example, quite easily. But some of the other aspects, like the social aspect, or whether something is describing career progression, it can be a lot trickier. And also because a lot of these things tend to come up in like lists, that's part of why we went for the approach where we took whole sentences and then split them up into smaller pieces. But I would say that the labeling part's really quite challenging. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add, Liz.
No, I agree. The labeling was definitely the hard bit, and I think what the point of kind of iteratively speaking as a team about what is job quality in a job advert was really important for this. And what speaks to that is the fact that we had 8 versions of the taxonomy that we mapped to, because, you know, throughout that process, it was just making those improvements and saying, oh, that's a bit that's actually not quite the right wording, and we should do this one, or finding out that some things just don't come up in job adverts, or they're going to be really hard to find. So, you know, we started looking for union representation, and it just turned out we could just see it wasn't coming up very often, but if it was coming up, then it would likely be a false positive. So yeah, I guess the lesson from that is, like, labeling is hard and also iterative.
Okay, thanks both. And perhaps just to pick up Julie's point, I think there's some really interesting work. I was at a launch on Monday of the Future of Work report, and one of the things that was discussed there was what is going to be the impact of AI specifically, but also wider technological impacts. And I think this could be quite a very useful tool to be getting sort of early warning systems, but perhaps that what happens to job quality with AI, because it could go both ways. It could decrease job quality, or it could take away some of the more mundane aspects and increase the quality or the engagement people have with their employment. I've got 5 minutes left. There are a few questions in the chat, so I'll go to Lewis in ONS. Lewis, do you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Sure, thank you, David. Well, you did actually cover a bit more. I asked this question early in the presentation, so perhaps just focus on the first bit, which was, have you done and demonstrated much around the bias in your data sources for the adverts, possibly against the real-world number of job vacancies? So I understand that would be a major factor in, like, understanding what the source value is ultimately when thinking about this space.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't think we've done loads on that. There was one of our data engineers did some work a while ago to check that the pay advertised with job adverts matched up to the annual survey of the ASH survey. And when I've looked at the data, it looked like there was, for example, not very many adverts from the northeast of England, but I have not yet gone one step further and checked like the populations of these different regions. It's I guess what I'm saying is the northeast has a lower population than maybe the southeast, but I was surprised by I felt that my impression was that there were not very, that the northeast of England was underrepresented, but I haven't quantified that. But yeah, this is an important question and something we could do more on.
Is there any sort of idea that that's something that we'll be committed to doing to understand this data better? Like, what's the roadmap ahead for this?
That's being decided at the moment. Is the frank answer. Yeah, internally we're going through a process of deciding how much more we do on this data, and we'll waiting for the outcome of that right now.
I'll watch this space then. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lewis. We've got a couple more questions. So Alan put a comment in around using the word claimed. I don't know, Alan, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, am I off mic? Yes, I think I am.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks a lot, Rosie and Liz. A great presentation. I should have said that in my comment, but mine's more a conceptual point. I think a lot of the other questions in the chat have been more technical. Mine is a conceptual point, a kind of a starting base point. So you do mention, you actually call it offered job quality. I think I would kind of qualify that even further and say claimed job quality offered, because it is claimed. These are adverts. These are trying to attract people to apply. So they are part of the kind of advertising kind of piece, really. And also, I think you need to be careful about what you're measuring here. For me, you're measuring flows into jobs, not the stock of jobs. And I think, so I think on entry is also another thing you need to discuss, because you're not measuring job quality of those in early years, for example. You're measuring the entry. So because it's adverts. So I think you need to be a little more careful about the language and what your data is actually reflecting. So there were two suggestions as to how you might kind of finesse that.
Thanks, Alan. So yeah, that's a really good point. And I now wish we called it claimed job quality, because yeah, even at the point of entry, some of the things that are in the job advert may not actually manifest on day one of the job. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I think there's one final question from Sarah.
Yes. Would it be possible to collect also information on the size of the company or the organization, because that will allow matching to firm level data and get more granular, like on the spirit of what Julia was saying before.
I can pick up that a little bit. At some point along the way, we did try to match specific companies. Something that trips us up quite a bit in this data set is recruiters in online job adverts, where there isn't actually information about the company hiring. It's much more obscure. And I think the recruiters account for maybe something like 40% of our job adverts, so it's pretty significant. But it would be, yeah, but
often they mention whether they are recruiting for I don't know, a multinational or a small or dynamic or startup. I don't know. Sometimes there are these words. So maybe I don't know. Obviously the coverage, but it would be interesting if you could get some information, because then a lot of more analysis will be possible.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. And fantastic work you're doing. Thank you very much.
It's just turn one, so probably that time's back up. But just on that question, whether there's scope for potentially matching some of the results from Nesta against something like our business register or some of our surveys that could then bring in information around things like number of sites, size of the business, how it's structured, whether it's national, multinational, or something. So I think potentially a lot of potential there. So we just got to 1 o'clock. So I just want to say a massive thank you to Rosie, Liz, and Julia for taking time coming along and presenting what is, I think, a really fascinating bit of work. And it does look like it will have a number of uses, both in terms of job quality, but I could see this also speaking out into other areas of the labour market where you want to do some monitoring of what's new is happening in a sort of very dynamic way, and perhaps much faster than perhaps our traditional surveys and admin data would. So really big thank you and good luck with taking the work forward, and hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Very much. Thanks, Julia, and thanks for sharing, David.
Thanks so much.